So how have we transferred this over to the artificial intelligence brain? In computing systems, we have created the following synthetic equivalences of this organic stuff that we just mentioned earlier. Now, as I said, in the human brain, we have these things called neurons, but in the synthesized IT equivalent, we call them nodes or artificial neurons. So an artificial neuron is not something that is grown by scientists in a lab. Don't think of it as a sort of entity in itself that you can physically pick up, but they are more like tiny pieces of code that behave in a certain way. Each individual piece of code does a small thing, carries out a small mathematical function, just like each node only carries out a small piece of function. So, for example, if one node understands the smell of the perfume or aftershave that your wife or husband might be wearing as they come into the room, well then it will trigger. And it will trigger the others that it's possible that that person has walked into a room. But each of the neurons now actually contributes to the solving of the problem. So in the same way, in software programs, each piece of synthetic neuron or node is a tiny piece of code that behaves in a certain way, carrying out a certain special function. Little programming engines with mathematical functions at the center. Actually, this looks like any other program you'll have come across. If you look at a piece of code with 50 million lines of code in there, then each line of code or each section of code relates to other sections within the software, invoking commands, answers, and functions. And so artificial neurons work in exactly the same way. They are small pieces of code carrying out a mathematical formula upon the input that they see. But the key thing here is that no piece of neural network node is required to do anything massively important. They all get involved doing their own tiny piece, just like our neurons work. So in deep learning, and a reminder, deep learning is machine learning when you apply the neural network methodology to it. So essentially in deep learning, we are using the same methods that are going on within our brain, and so we're emulating the neural network approach. So in deep learning, these artificial neurons are designed to work with each other, just like our brain, layer upon layer. Each individual not necessarily doing huge amounts of work, but together working as an interconnected group of workers. And just like the neurons in our brain, they can break down huge problems into simpler, smaller component parts, and on working with them, they can come out with the same synergistic effects that are found in our human brain.